Welcome back. It's another edition of Beyond the Box Score because Jacob and I never feel like we can get to everything we want to in Monday's show. So let's do it on Thursday again. And on these Thursdays, we seem to be getting some unbelievable guests, but this is my favorite one we've had so far. It's somebody I've looked up to in the industry for a long time, since his days at Roto-World. He's well beyond that at this point, though. It's Adam Levitan. You know him from Establish the Run. So, Adam, I just want to hear a little bit about how your season's going so far. Let's start there. And just some things that look out for at ETR right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think the season has started in a way where if you were on running back heavy builds, you're probably doing well right now. I thought for season long leagues, for home leagues, it was pretty clear that the best strategy was running back start, or two running backs out of the first 3 rounds. And that was not because I thought there would be some huge running back revolution like is going on. It was just because through the middle rounds, it was so clear to me that there were wide receiver plays that I wanted way more than running back plays. And that's kind of looked bad in some sense, right? Like I thought it wasn't even close between, say, I don't know, Tank Dell and Alvin Kamara. Like I'd rather have Tank Dell. And that looks really bad right now, right? But if you started with something like Saquon Achan or Brees Kyron, and then you went into these wide receivers that I thought were really good hits, like Neighbors, Rashee Rice. I thought T. Higgins was in there, JSN, guys like that. I mean, million more wide receivers to that middle range and tight ends and quarterbacks. I thought that was right strategy. And I think that's going okay. The zero RB stuff does not look good. And I did a lot of that in best ball, and that clearly does not look good right now. But it doesn't mean it's going to be sticky through the whole season. I think that's something to be cognizant of for sure.
All right, Jacob, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm good. I also am on the zero RB train. Levitan and I are both Saquon Barkley faders, so we are sharing and suffering today. But yeah, it's a long season. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm also super psyched to have Levitan on. Of course, I remember like back in college, like just being obsessed with the show that he would do with JM to win. Who's going? I'm hoping to have him on later in the season. Just one of the absolute sharpest DFS thinkers I've ever encountered. JM, so good. And like him and Levitan every week was truly like gold. Like I couldn't believe that it was free. The Three Donkeys podcast, like Peter. Oh man, I meant to be like, hello. I meant to introduce out of that way. The Peter Jennings and John Bales podcast back in the day. Like what I've always loved about the brand is that it's just so fun, and that carries over to Establish the Run. They've got an awesome team and a massive, massive team covering so much ground. Prop betting, DFS, season long, whatever you need. They've got really cool tools. Like they just introduced this trade calculator that looks really useful. They've got just some of the best projections ever. Mike Leone, maybe the best at building fantasy projections in the world. The dude is a wizard. And it's really fun. That's my favorite part of it is like they've got this whole team that they've built from the ground up. And so unlike me and Dan, who are big corporate here at CBS, they can do whatever they want. They can say whatever they want, and they make it really, really fun. And that it's just so great that people like Adam and entities like Establish the Run exist as well. Like it just makes the space better. So psyched to have Adam here, and really excited to pick your brain.
Yeah, well, really appreciate that. Too kind, guys. Thank you.
No, it's awesome. I mean, I love listening to your solo pods the most. That's where I'm at because I view fantasy as interesting since we work in it. I less so look during the week for content of like matchups and things like that and kind of the nitty gritty data. I kind of look for the fun and I want to have fun when I'm listening to podcasts, which you guys do a great job of. But there's something I want to touch on with you right away, Adam, because it's something you brought up a little bit in the intro. And I saw you tweet about it this week. You said in a tweet a little earlier today that all 7 of your highest flex projections for week 4 are running backs. And I wanted to kind of get into this a little bit with you, maybe a little 30,000 foot view if we can. Is this more slate based, or do you think we're seeing this massive shift in what our expectations should be moving forward for running backs versus receivers? Because I've personally always operated under the basis of I'm looking to fill every one of my flexes with wide receivers at all times. Is that something I may have to change moving forward?
I think we have to at least consider it. I mean, the way that defenses are playing now is, hey, you want to do a 5-yard run? Cool, take it. You want to do another 5-yard run? Cool, take it. Let's see who gets bored first, right? And like defenses now are not getting bored. They're not like, oh, you know what? He got 7 yards on his last run. We better get 8 men in the box. This is crazy. They're like, no, we're going to stay back and we're going to make sure they don't beat us over the top. We're going to make them string together 12, 13, 14 play drives, which is really hard to do, right? But that is going to lead towards more volume. We see it in the pass rate over expectation stats. I mean, there are very few teams now that are over expectation, whereas in 2020, I guess, kind of the heyday of modern passing, like two-thirds to three-quarters of the teams were above pass rate over expectation. So I also think we have like this situation, the quarterback play, which is just not great. We have not had a lot of, Trevor Lawrence busting and Deshaun Watson busting and Daniel Jones busting. And there's just so many guys that were taken in the first round, turned out to not be great quarterbacks. And then you also had that whole Brady, Rodgers, Breeze tier either fall off or retire. So I think quarterback play is a problem. And yeah, I think it's clear that running backs are more valuable now than probably I thought they would be 2 or 3 months ago.
It's a really interesting setup. I love that you somehow found a way to manage Daniel Jones of the likes of like Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, like much better quarterback prospects. Or maybe you just saw that Giants thing, football back then and thought it would appeal to me. It's the opposite. I'm looking to get rid of Daniel Jones, but time will tell when that will happen. But it is really interesting. I saw something a little bit earlier that we're seeing just such a different percentage of middle of the field closed looks from defenses from that 2020 heyday till now. And that basically means, look, if they're going to have those two high safeties, those split looks, and even some cover 3, cover 6, similar situations, it's going to be difficult for quarterbacks to challenge down the field, which I think will lead to more of that. I thought, and Jacob thought, and I know we both were wrong about this so far, that this would lead to more tight end production because quarterbacks still can challenge that seam. And I saw Andy Dalton do it last week with Tommy Tremble. So if Andy Dalton could do it with Tremble, I would hope some quarterbacks can get a little more aggressive there, but we haven't seen it quite yet. So we're going to get into on this show some expectations for players going forward. Hopefully you guys can use that to shape DFS lineups for this week, moving forward, trades, things of that nature. But before we do that, I do want to take a quick break to hear a word from one of our sponsors.
Can I get a spot real quick?
Yeah, sure, man. Hey, wait a minute. You're Dave Richard from FFT.
Yeah.
Huh. Hey, I snagged Alvin Kamara in the 4th round. What do you think?
Is it PPR?
Yeah, full point.
All right, let's get back into this thing right here. I know every time we bring on a guest and they see those commercials for the first time, you usually get a smirk. It's pretty well done by the CBS team, so great job on those. But I want to start with the big topic here for this week, Adam. It's Jayden Daniels, rookie quarterback for Washington. Phenomenal first performance. Look, Jacob and I were very harsh on Cliff Kingsbury this entire offseason, but I got to give Cliff some credit for not only an incredible game plan in week 3, but even week 2. Like, he faces the Giants and Shane Bone's defense, and Shane Bone is playing insanely off coverage the entire time. And he just takes what he can get with an efficient game plan. They weren't great in the red zone, but they didn't punt again that game. You moving forward from a fantasy standpoint, where are you at with Daniels? Like, do you have him over players like Kyler or Anthony Richardson? Or is it time to start considering him in that first tier with guys like Mahomes and Hurts? I don't even know if you consider Mahomes in that first tier anymore.
Yeah, I think over Anthony Richardson for sure. I mean, we're not even seeing that many designed runs for Anthony Richardson, and his scramble rate isn't that high anyway. So, like, I think you can kind of throw it out on Anthony Richardson, where he's going to have these massive rushing games. I'm disappointed in the way that he's been kind of used so far, I would say. I think that when a rookie that people are excited about plays on an island game on Monday night and everybody's watching and he goes nuts, yeah, there's going to be overreactions, right? Defenses are going to figure something out here with Jayden Daniels. I don't think it's like a 1-for-1 comparison, but Robert Griffin III was similarly just shot out of a cannon his rookie year for the Commanders, then the Redskins. And like, eventually, and I know the injuries played a part in it, but eventually defenses figured him out quickly. So I don't want to sit here and say Jayden Daniels is the next coming. He's God. He's going to be the best quarterback. I think I'd still have Kyler, Lamar, Hurts, Allen for sure ahead of him. I think I'd probably rather have Jayden than Patrick Mahomes. I think I'd probably rather have Jayden than CJ Stroud. I'm talking about fantasy now.
Yep.
Probably have Jayden rather than CJ Stroud. I think the ideal quarterback, and you saw this when Josh Allen was really young, he's very aggressive throwing deep, and he also runs with kind of reckless abandon. And that's what Josh Allen did. And you create huge floor ceiling combos when you have that. So I'm excited about Jayden Daniels. I don't want to get as high as I think some people are getting in the wake of that Monday night game, but clearly it's a hit for both fantasy and it looks like real life.
Yeah, Jacob, where are you at with Jayden? Where have you moved him in your rankings? Is this somebody that you're looking to maybe sell high if you have, or is it somebody that you're looking to buy high if you don't have?
I wouldn't be selling him. I had Jayden ahead of Kyler going into the year and right behind Anthony Richardson. I think that at this point it is fair to move him ahead of Anthony Richardson. I will say, for me, the thesis with A-Rich was not necessarily that he was going to produce the same type of running numbers that Daniels might inside the 20s, outside of the red zone, but that he could score 15 touchdowns, that he could challenge Josh Allen for rushing touchdowns. But we just really haven't seen them get to the red zone very often. And I don't know. I think that could change. I think the offense could be better. I do believe in Shane Steichen still. So I don't want to be completely out on Richardson. I guess I'm kind of curious after hearing Levitan frame it, like where he would have Richardson relative to some of those guys you just mentioned, like ahead of Stroud, ahead of Mahomes, or behind these guys.
Yeah. Still have Richardson ahead of Mahomes and Stroud for sure. Yeah. It's just so hard for Stroud, especially. Like, he needs volume and efficiency, and the Texans just haven't been throwing the ball at the same rate that I thought that they would. I thought they'd be among the league leaders in throw rate given their personnel and given year 2 of Stroud and how good that he looked. But they've been, even without Mixon, and Mixon may not play again this week, they've been somewhat leaning towards the run. And so Stroud doesn't give you any rushing yards, you need so much volume and so much efficiency for sure. And then, Mahomes is just looks like a game manager, looks like a game manager, period. And I think he's going to have some spike games when he goes crazy efficient on touchdowns, but it's hard for me to see those 300, 350, 375-yard games we used to come to expect from Mahomes.
The biggest issue with Mahomes right now is just the Chiefs defense is so much better than it used to be when Mahomes was putting up those numbers in fantasy. And it's changed the entire perspective for Andy Reid and how he calls a game. And I feel like I see that every time I watch the Chiefs. I also think losing Hollywood Brown, look, we didn't see it. We never got to see him on the Chiefs, but I feel like that offense would have been so different with him in there because unlike Worthy, they trust him to run the full route tree, which clearly they don't trust right now for whatever reason, Reid. And it doesn't seem like that's going to just change in 1 week. On the Richardson front, it's really interesting because Jacob mentioned it best. I thought he'd be somebody who can be a weapon in the red zone, but I wasn't. I was low on the totem pole with Richardson just because I didn't trust that offense to kind of stay on script, which is something that Richardson has really struggled to do at the NFL level, which you still need to have good fantasy numbers. But as far as Jayden goes, where I'm at with him, I've moved him all the way up. I just feel like they have something going there strong, and they've found a way to negate the offensive line, which was my biggest concern for Daniels going into this season. However, so I don't know if that'll continue. I don't feel like the matchups have been the reason why that's happened, but I want to move toward a different offense right here because it's going to be a big change moving forward. It's the Green Bay offense with Jordan Love returning. Kudos to Matt LaFleur for finding a way to scheme space and finding a way to scheme a pass game with Malik Willis. Unbelievable stuff. But it's about to go into hyper mode with this return of Love because he is so much better at running that offense. I want to know your guys' expectations, and I'll start with you, Adam, for the receivers moving forward. Jayden Reed, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, who has started to eat a little into Watson's snap share, and then Romeo Doubs. And anything from Musgrave or Kraft for you?
Yeah, I thought Kraft got hurt last week. Looks like he's back in practice, so that's going to be kind of, I think, a deadish spot for the most part. I mean, wide receiver, it's clearly Jayden Reed, right? I mean, he is the best receiver, the most complete receiver, the most explosive receiver. I understand all the 3 wide receiver set concerns. I think that's overblown for the most part. He earns targets at such a high rate, even when he's competing with really strong guys. So I really like Jayden Reed for sure. Dobbs, I think, is the one who, if you were trying to buy someone, it would be easiest to buy Dobbs. And I don't hate that if you were trying to buy Dobbs in the trade market right now. I don't think he's like the best player in the world, but he's going to run the most routes on this team. And if you think Jordan Love goes off, Dobbs is going to get hit with some of that. Watson and Wicks, I think, will continue to rotate to some degree. We do have Watson pretty well ahead of Wicks in our rest of season rankings. But yeah, I think that those guys are going to be tough starts on a week-to-week basis, just based on the way they play. But we're keeping a 1 injury away list for anybody out there in season-long leagues, and it's not just running backs. Normally people think of, if Breece Hall gets hurt, Braylon Allen's going to smash. Yeah, clearly. But also we have on there some other non-running back positions, and I think Dontavian Wicks, if something were to happen to one of the Packers wide receivers, Wicks is still worth holding in your league because he's going to have a really good spot if he can ever have a full-time role.
Where are you at, Jacob, with this passing game moving forward? Are there any buys for you right now, or selling, or anything you're looking at with maybe Jacobs with the return of Love, maybe more scoring opportunities?
I think you could buy Jayden Reed, to be honest. He hasn't done much the last 2 games. I mean, maybe if you've
Yeah.
got a sharp, manager that has him, then probably not. They know Love's coming back, of course. The routes are going to increase. But yeah, Jayden Reed, since he entered the NFL, has averaged the same number of receiving PPR points as A.J. Brown. And then when you add on rushing to that, he's been more productive than A.J. Brown, than Brandon Ayuk, than Mike Evans, than Puka Nacua on a per opportunity basis. Of course, he doesn't see quite the same routes as those guys, but his route rate is up to 75% this year. That's higher than it was last year. They're really intentional about the way that they use these guys. They're getting Reed on the field for passing situations. They're getting Watson on the field when they're in the red zone. And I do think that even though we are seeing Wicks cut into Watson's role a little bit, we're not seeing Watson as a full-time player like he has been in the past when he's been healthy. He still has that potential to go for double-digit touchdowns this year with Love, because I think he's going to be the primary target when in scoring distance. He has the highest end zone percentage of end zone targets of any player since he's entered the NFL when he's on the field. So yeah, I think Adam's right that Wicks is a decent hold as well. I think the backfield is interesting too, because Emmanuel Wilson has looked really good. Like he's outplaying Jacobs for what it's worth. Obviously, it's kind of the Tony Pollard Zeke effect where he's, Jacobs is exhausted. He's touching the ball 20, 25 times. But I think he is somebody who's intriguing to stash, and Marshawn Lloyd can't seem to stay healthy. Jacobs, I think, is somebody that you could buy low on as well, because I think he is going to just have a massive role, and this is going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL.
That's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm buying on all of these players for the most part. Obviously, Reed is top of my mind, and Jacobs there, because I feel like this offense is going to be so much better moving forward than people realize, which also leads me to believe Jordan Love is somebody for Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues I'm trying to target right now, was trying to all week. Where do you guys rank Jordan Love moving forward versus the guys that we just talked about in the Jayden Daniels discussion? Is he below all of those guys for you?
Wouldn't shock me at all if he outproduces Mahomes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just checking here what we have for Love.
Yeah.
We have Love behind Mahomes, Stroud types. I think that there's some concern that the knee stuff lingers. He gives you stone 0 rushing, and they're effective running the ball with Josh Jacobs, whereas at least we know with the Chiefs, the pass rate's going to remain really, really high. So yeah, I still think that Stroud, Mahomes, probably maybe Burrow. I think it's really close between like Burrow, Dak, and Love. Like that tier to me is kind of a similar tier. Burrow, Dak, and Love there.
And just one quick note on Watson and Wicks. The route rates are thrown off a little bit by the blowout last week. It was a 65% route rate for Watson in the first half compared to 47% for Wicks. So it's not like he's really catching up to him. I do think he's clearly ahead. It was just a blowout.
Yeah, even so, though, just eating into it at all, I think the expectation going into the year was that that would maybe be at the expense of Reed. And since that's not the case, I think that's why there's our signal for buying Reed right now. I want to move to another offense. This was one that we broke down on Beyond the Boxscore earlier this week, Adam, and it was unbelievable watching this tape. That's what we do for the show. We break down the film. I charted 7 throws from Andy Dalton and the new look Panthers offense in that game that I, on a week-to-week basis, see quarterbacks maybe make 1 to 3 of them. And this is not an exaggeration. We're talking about intermediate and vertical shots, some hole shots, seam throw to Tommy Tremble that I mentioned earlier. Obviously, the touchdown, you guys all saw the 2 touchdowns. The Deontay Johnson one was another phenomenal throw, just perfect touch and perfect ball placement. Andy Dalton played football at a higher level last week than we've seen. Is this overreaction time, or where are we at now moving forward with this Panthers offense under Dalton? Deontay Johnson specifically, one of the best target earners and separators over the last 5 years, never had a good quarterback. Is Dalton that guy? And I want to hear about not only that, but maybe a little bit of a future outlook on a player like Jonathan Brooks and how you see the running back situation shaking out.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like, not only was it so starkly contrasted to Bryce Young's ineptitude, but just the way the quarterback position has been going. It's like, oh, you can't throw against too high. You can't throw against too high. You can't throw deep. Andy Dalton is the one that goes out there and is like, well, actually, you can. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, Andy Dalton, even when Andy Dalton was in his prime, Like, it's
I
not like he was
know.
Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or something like that. When Andy Dalton was in his prime, he was okay. I thought he knew how to quarterback an NFL team. He was like never better than league average. So now to suggest that with this Panthers, with this talent deficient Panthers team at age 36, now he's going to come out and throw for 300 yards every week, that would really shock me. We don't have Andy Dalton at all in our rest of season top 150. Clearly, it's good for Deontay Johnson. We're up to 58 overall rest of season on Deontay Johnson. Clearly, that's good. We're up to 90 overall on Jonathan Brooks. Clearly, this is a good thing for Jonathan Brooks. Just running competent offense is going to be a great thing for those guys. Obviously, expecting what happened last week with the Raiders is just not going to happen consistently. I mean, it's just not. I mean, teams are going to be more prepared to play for Andy Dalton, not just like they'll start to get more prepared to play against Jayden Daniels, and he'll face more talented defenses. So I like these guys. They're fine, but I have a feeling that in like trade markets, people are going too far on Panther stuff would be my guess.
I love it. I think we've got Joe Flacco just like DGF out here where I just watched really great episode of Scheme done by Josh Norris with Colt McCoy. And Josh basically asked Colt, like, if you're a quarterback at the end of your career here and you're coming in with nothing to lose, like, do you think your mentality is different where you're more likely to be aggressive and attack these spots that you know can be open, attacking deep down the field versus too high than some of these other quarterbacks? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And it's like, that's kind of what I saw. Like he was really aggressive, and yeah, defenses will probably adjust. But I think it could work. And the offensive line is playing really well, and the talent is there. Yeah, Deontay Johnson isn't one of the best. He's the best at getting open, according to ESPN's open rate over the past 5 years, ahead of Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, anybody else. I'm all in. And yeah, Jonathan Brooks, I think, is really, really intriguing for PPR. I'm curious how big of a role you think Chuba Hubbard is going to play, because he has looked phenomenal. His rushing success rate is insane. And so that's just like, if it's first down, if he gets half of the yardage required, if it's second down, if he gets half the yardage required, that's a success. If it's third or fourth down, he gets a first down, that's a success. I think it's like 77% or something. It's nuts. He's looked really, really good and kept the offense on track when they've had functional QB play. I wonder if he might still be in a role as an early down option when Brooks is back. Do you think Brooks still has a window for 3-down role or not?
Oh, I never did. And that was the reason
Okay.
I took I was like one of the only people that took no Jonathan Brooks. You know, I just thought Bryce Young's quarterback in this offense. They have this kid, they're going to be terrible. They have this kid, Jonathan Brooks, who they think is a big part of their long-term plan. You're really going to bring him back out here when you're 1-6 or 2-8 and give him 20 carries? No way, right? So I thought Jonathan Brooks was just like an easy-ish fade, but now even on 12 touches or 13 touches, I'm kind of worried about Jonathan Brooks shoving it down my throat at that point. So yeah, I think Chuba's not going away. Chuba was one of the better running backs in the league last year. I think PFF had him as like their 16th best running back out of 70 or 65 qualifiers or something like that. Chuba can play. I don't think there's any reason for the Panthers to come back and go full workhorse on Jonathan Brooks, but doesn't mean that he still can't be productive if Andy Dalton can sustain this.
Let me get a temperature check on Deontay Johnson. Drake London, Chris Olave, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, DJ Moore. We taking him ahead of any of those guys? Full PPR?
Not me. I've never. I think like I get that he gets open. I'm not sure that's like the best predictor of how good a fantasy wide receiver is going to be. Those other guys to me are so much more explosive. So who would you say? DJ Moore? Yeah, DJ Moore, we have 34. That's probably the closest one. We have DJ Moore 34 and Deontay Johnson 58.
I think I would take him ahead of Devontae Adams.
Devontae Adams, yeah. I mean, you're flying on the wild side now.
You really are. But like Jacob said, he's all in on this expectation for Carolina. I think the key takeaway I had here was something you mentioned, a little small point you mentioned, Jacob, about what Colt McCoy said. And it's really interesting to hear if, later career quarterbacks are more willing to take chances. I'll say this, against these types of looks, these 2-eye looks that we're seeing from all these defenses, there are opportunities for you to take shots. I talked about that Tommy Tremble seam shot. I don't understand why quarterbacks don't take more seam shots. I think they're worried about getting their receiver hurt. But in the end, like with these new rules, you really can't fly in as a safety and light these guys up. And I think the rules work to the favor of taking these opportunities. But it wasn't just, him taking shots against tight windows. The timing was the key. This is the thing with quarterbacks like Andy Dalton that I think make a big difference. anticipatory throwing, timing, and rhythm. They're way more important in quarterbacking than people realize. And there was a couple of routes. There was a Deontay Johnson, like intermediate 15-yard out where the ball was right there as he gets out of his break, and it was thrown before he got out of his break. Like, this difference that I'm seeing from watching him versus most of these quarterbacks is going to lead to more yards and a more sustained drive. So I'm kind of leaning toward where you're at with this, Jacob, but we'll see if we get burned from that.
Well,
I want to talk about one more offense here, and then we're going to take a quick break. I want to talk about the Bills offense as we move forward. Obviously, incredible game in week 3. I think a great point was made by Warren Sharp personally, where he talked about Josh Allen's career against teams that are man coverage heavy, or just his career stats against man coverage and zone coverage, night and day, like light years apart. He's so much better against man. The Jaguars play more man than anybody in the NFL. I don't know why. They don't have the talent to do it, but they're just doing it. That's just, we run our system and that's it. Those types of teams and coaches. So I don't want to look too much into that week, but where are you guys at with this? I'll start with you this time, Jacob. Like, do you have any different expectations from what you've seen so far with a player like Dalton Kincaid? Like, where's James Cook at for you? Khalil Shakir, any expectations there moving forward? Are we going to see a target increase?
Can't stop talking about the Tommy Trimble seam shot. I love it. 3 Tommy Trimble shoutouts. I've been picking him up in Dynasty. I love it. Okay, so yeah, I want to focus on Khalil Shakir because he's been insane. This is a guy who I've been enamored with since I, scouted him coming into the league. Watched every route that he's run over the past 2 years because I swear to God, this guy is so good, but he can't get on the field. The Bills repeatedly tried to replace Khalil Shakir for whatever reason, but he continues to just force his way into a role. 90% of his targets since the start of last year. That's how many of his targets he has caught. The next highest rate is 76%. He's averaged 13.2 yards per target. Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk, and Justin Jefferson are the only other players above 10. No one is above 12. He's at 13.2. He's nuts. And he's really good after the catch as well. And he is starting to play more and get targeted more. They're targeting him more on in-breaking routes per fantasy points data. That is really exciting because that's where he's at his best. I wish they would design stuff to him. His first read target rate is really not all that high. That has been mostly Dalton Kincaid at this point. But I'm psyched for Shakir. And then obviously the other guys we have to talk about are James Cook and Kincaid. Cook, he's got the role. He's got the role in the red zone, unlike we've ever seen before. He's playing more. They're continuing to use him as a pass catcher. Obviously, we saw the almost long touchdown catch in the Island game. I don't know where I'm at on him. Me and Dan both were kind of down on James Cook. We both really like Ray Davis. We were worried about his ability to get touchdowns, but he is playing in the red zone a ton. So, the guys that I brought up were James Conner, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, and Josh Jacobs. Would you push him ahead of any of that group? I think Connor makes sense, and Henry is a maybe. I don't know if I would have him ahead of JT or Jacobs.
Yeah. We have James Cook, one of our biggest movers from preseason. We were in the 60s, I think, on James Cook to start the year. Now we have James Cook at 21 overall, and that's right there with Kamara. We have 19, Jacobs 22, Derrick Henry 23. We have James Conner way down at 50, partially because we're expecting more and more Trey Benson as the season goes along. But yeah, I mean, James Cook, like you mentioned, is playing around the goal line now. And that's a big thing. I mean, one of the reasons that we weren't maybe as high as we should have been on James Cook was how often does Josh Allen throw to running back, and how often does Josh Allen throw to running back in the red zone, and how many rushing touchdowns is Josh Allen going to take, So he's run hot. So far, James Cook has on touchdowns. There's no doubt about that, but they're using him, I think, in a different way. That's exciting. And yeah, on the Bills pass catching stuff, I thought it'd be super flat. I didn't take any of the Bills pass catchers. I just thought everyone would earn somewhere between 3 and 7 targets every week. The one that I thought would separate was Dalton Kincaid, and just been wrong on that. And even though I know it looked better last week, he got the end zone touchdown. He had a target deep down the right sideline. Dawson Knox still playing a little bit too much, and it's just there's no intent to get Dalton Kincaid going. So I'm a little worried. I'm not giving up on Dalton Kincaid by any chance. I'm just a little bit worried there. We're down a little bit from our preseason rank on Dalton Kincaid. We're down to 66 overall. I think we had him.
Played more than him in the first half of last week's game. He played more than Kincaid. What?
I know. It's bad.
Yeah, that's the one that's really hurting me the most. I was highest on Dalton Kincaid. He was one of my highest ranked tight ends. I had him over the big bunch in there that we had after the Kelsey Laporta range. I just thought, like Adam said, there'd be more concerted effort to run the offense through him. I was wrong. And I look back at some of what has been done with that offense since Joe Brady took over. And I kind of am questioning myself, like, why did I get to this point of thinking that this offense would operate through him? It was mostly based on his talent and his skill set, which I still believe in, but role is so important. I just don't feel like it's changing. Like last week didn't make me feel any better about Dalton Cade. Yes, he hit a big sideline play and got a target in the red zone. Like I didn't want that. I wanted this offense to operate through him in the passing game, which it just clearly does not look like it will. I like Shakir the most as the buy here if I'm buying any of these players because of what Jacob said. I think he's really close to being like the guy that you want in on your fantasy teams moving forward. In that wide receiver 3 role. All right, we're gonna take one more break.
I do think it's really important
go
to point out that the perimeter receivers on this team are Matt Collins and MVS. Those are the players who Dalton, Kincaid, and Shakir are competing for targets with.
And Keon Coleman.
Yeah. I don't think he can get open. I don't think he can get targets. I don't think he's probably better at demanding targets than MVS, but I don't know.
But they're running such a different offense. Like it's not like last week it looked really good in the passing game against man coverage, but against zone, it's so heavily run through James Cook, I feel like, which is it's fine. That's how they're running the offense. It worked last year. It's just hard for me to believe that Kincaid is going to have the role I expected him to have. But we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get into a few more of these players, reevaluating some of our lottery ticket running backs and more. Right back.
We need your sports news anywhere.
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
All right, one situation we have to get into because we get asked about it every single day. Every single time I'm talking to people on our, in no matter what the podcast is, Jacob, they want to know about what to do with their Dolphins players. Tua, we're not entirely sure when he's going to come back. Adam, I saw you posted or you tweeted something a little bit earlier this week. Like it's a little nugget you found in an article about maybe, he wants to play again this season. Maybe it is week 7 that we can look at. I feel like it's so much speculation at this point. I do feel like this offense is basically dead without Tua. For the most part, I'm not high on Tyler Huntley, and I don't think Tyler Huntley is going to move the ball the way people expect him to. I want to start with Devin Achane, a player who obviously it looked early on like it was going to be a big hit for anyone who drafted him. Now I'm feeling less confident. Where are you at with Achane moving forward? What are your expectations? How will he look until they get Tua back?
Yeah, I think Achane is really the only one we can talk about because the receivers, you're not going to be able to sell them. I guess maybe you could sell Tyreek, but I think you're just praying the Tua returns. Whereas Achane, he's getting so much work that he might be relevant even without a QB change. They're throwing him the ball like crazy. Only Breece Hall and Aaron Jones have been targeted at a higher rate at the running back position. Did not see that coming in Minnesota, but that's awesome. And then the red zone involvement for Achane is way up, way beyond anything that we saw from him as a rookie. Obviously, most of their being out contributes to that, but they trust Jeff Wilson, I feel like, and they're still just like treating Achane like a bell cow. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on the rushing efficiency. It's just a 3 game sample size, so we don't want to overreact, but his rushing efficiency is way down. And that is something that we saw at Texas A&M as well. His first 2 years at Texas A&M, he was splitting a backfield with Isaiah Spiller, more of a big plotter type, and was just absurdly efficient, like kind of similar to what we saw last year. And then his 3rd year, he got the backfield to himself, and he really was a workhorse. He had multiple games with over 20 touches. He only missed 2, I think maybe 3 games. So he was able to handle that workload for the most part relatively healthy, but his efficiency did come way down. He was still good, but his rushing efficiency did come down, kind of similar to what we're seeing this year. And so, like, if the rushing efficiency isn't similar to what we saw last year or even close, like, what is he's like Kamara kind of, but in a much worse offense. Like, what I don't really know what he is exactly like prototypically, what kind of fantasy contributor he is. Then obviously you have to worry about the health as well.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say bad things about Devon Achane. We've seen players like this succeed with poor quarterback play in the past. I do think Huntley would be better for Achane than Skylar Thompson would be. Just a threat of the rush that they're going to run. They're going to run a bunch of RPO stuff, I'm sure, with. And I trust Mike McDaniel to get it figured out. So I would not be panic selling Achane whatsoever right now. The rushing efficiency was always going to come down off last year. Right? And I know it's going to come down I don't know, everybody knows it was going to come down, but, it was going to come down a lot, but even if he averages 5 yards a carry, that's still one of the best in the NFL. Can he get back to that? I don't know for sure, but I think it's at least possible. This first week for the Dolphins, I mean, God, it's like so shell shocked. Gotta go across the country. You just lost your
Yep.
quarterback. Like, I don't want to say I want to throw it out, but I'm not like as panicked as maybe I should be. But yeah, totally agree on the point about the Dolphins guys in season long on the receivers. I mean, what are you going to do with Tyreek and Waddle? There's nothing you can do. I mean, no one's going to buy them from you right now. And so I wouldn't be panicking. It's good news to me that Tua wants to play. My first instinct would be like, I don't want to play football anymore, And I think for him, it's up to him. He wants to decide to play. Sounds like he wants to play. Then I think he's probably going to come back, So I definitely would not be selling Tua and Waddle like for free. I get some people who have Tyreek and Waddle are probably 0-3, and if that's the case, then maybe you need to do something sooner, even if you're getting worse of the deal.
You can't trade Waddle. I had Waddle. I'm way overweight on Waddle this year, so you can't trade him. I've tried, and there's just no market. Tyreek, I think, is interesting because he's big enough name that I still think you can get. You're not going to get good value for what you expect for him, but you're going to get something if you're 0-3 and hoping. But I do think I lean toward where Adam's at because Tua wants to play. He said he wants to play, but also I just think knowing Mike McDaniel a little bit, if Tua wasn't going to play, we would have seen them make some kind of move other than Huntley. Prior to now. Okay, we're going to skip over a segment we had, and we're going to get straight into reevaluating some of these rookies here. And I want to get into the wide receiver position with you. A few big names that we've talked about a ton, Adam, this offseason, because Jacob and I are huge fans of basically all of these guys on film. It's Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr., and Xavier Worthy. I want to reevaluate where we're at with these wide receivers moving forward, if there's sells or buys. We can start with the guy who had the biggest week 3, and that's Rome Odunze. Where are you at with Rome?
Yeah, I just think given the Bears' upcoming schedule, I mean, their next 5 games, you could not paint a better schedule for this past game to get going. I understand Keenan Allen's likely coming back this week, but I would actually not be selling Rome Odunze right now. I think he would be a hold with this upcoming schedule and kind of the breakout game that he had last week.
Jacob, are you in the same boat there?
Yeah, the Bears schedule is crazy. We'll get to that in more detail. I'm super excited with Odunze. I feel like he's the guy who Caleb really has a lot of trust in, and the chemistry is there. This is just, watching Hard Knocks and watching the games and everything. Like, I don't actually know what is going on, but that's the way it looks to me. And Odunze is also really good. Fantasy Points data has him, I think, at 6th or 7th in average separation score already. In his first few games as a rookie, playing through an MCL injury, like, that's nuts. And that's who we thought he was going to be. Matt Harmon had him as his wide receiver 2 in this class. Yeah, I think he's really, really good. And so I think he's honestly maybe somebody you could even buy. Brian Thomas Jr., I'm a little bit worried about. He also is really, really good. Clearly, you watch him. He just moves different than anyone else out there, but the offense is broken. And the schedule is not great either. So I just don't know if it's happening for him this year, unfortunately. And then Xavier Worthy, I kind of feel the same way. I have more optimism that the offense might turn around because obvious differences in infrastructure. But I don't know. They got him more involved on screens and like intentional short yardage stuff, catch and run stuff in week 3. So hopefully we can continue to see that evolve. Because early it was just go routes. And so, yeah, I don't know what to think of Casey's offense. Do you have any takes on how the target distribution might shake out, Adam?
Yeah, I think that it's the opposite of the Rashee Rice thing last year. What you want is guys just playing a little bit and earning a lot of targets. It's the opposite with Xavier Worthy. He's playing a lot and not earning targets at all. So, like, when they started to ramp up Rashee Rice's workload last year, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a printing press with Worthy. He's not earning targets, man. And like all these like stats, like all this stuff, separation scores and it's all just reflective of the bottom line. Are you earning targets? You know what I mean? Period. And like, if you're really good at separating, you're going to earn targets. If you're really good at running routes, you're going to earn targets, And so Xavier Worthy not doing that when he's competing with Juju Smith-Schuster and Justin Watson and the corpse of Travis Kelce, it's scary on Worthy for sure. I have him, I think, in a season-long league, and I just have him on my bench for now. I don't know really what else to do.
Yeah, I don't think you sell right now with him. I want to start with Rome Odunze, very interesting one. He's my most rostered rookie just because I felt like he was closer to the top 3 than he was the guys after him as far as talent goes, and I like Caleb Williams. But one thing that concerns me there a little bit is the return of Keenan Allen. I think the offense will take a different shape once Allen is back in there, just judging off what I've saw throughout training camp, even throwing in some Hard Knock stuff, and just how I think Shane Waldron wants to move this specific offense, given the offensive line that they have there in Chicago. I also just have no faith in Shane Waldron at all. I think he designs the stone worst run scheme in the NFL, with the exception of maybe Zach Taylor. So it just hurts when you're just that one-dimensional as an offense. I think you're going to have some games like they had in the first two. All right, let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. We're going to let Adam go. He's got a lot to go on right now. Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Let us know, let the fans know at the end, let the fans know, I should say right now, where they can find your work and what's coming up at ETR.
Sure. Is this show on YouTube?
The show will be on YouTube, correct?
So if you guys are on YouTube, you just pop right over, Establish the Run YouTube channel. It's totally free. Check it out. You can see what we have going on over there. And yeah, that's a good place to start, I think.
All right, so start over there. Adam's going to jump off now. When we get back, Jacob and I, we will talk a little bit more game previews. Thanks again, Adam, for joining us, and hopefully you have a good week 4.
For sure. Appreciate it, guys. Be good.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
All right, Jacob, let's do it. We got a few more minutes today, and we want to wrap up with some things we didn't get a chance to get to here, Jacob. So let's do a little game preview stuff. Where do you want to start? What's a game you want to discuss a little bit more?
Yeah, let's start in Atlanta. We've got the Falcons and Saints. I did really want to get Adam's thoughts on this, but we didn't quite get there. That's no big deal. Drake London and Chris Olave might be my favorite DFS pairing this week. I know a lot of our listeners aren't DFS people, but I did want to just, like, for my own selfish reasons, quickly hear what Adam thought about that, because he's a huge DFS grinder. They're both too cheap, and I think that their DFS price is kind of a microcosm of like where we're at with these players in general. So I think they're probably too cheap across the board, all formats, in terms of what you might be able to get them for in trades. I really love the matchup for London against New Orleans. I detailed why in the FFT newsletter in that Wednesday matchup column. You've got to check that out if you don't know what I'm talking about. Subscribe to the FFT newsletter. I think that the way that they're using Drake London is perfect. It's basically the Puka Nacua role. I also laid this out on Twitter. If you search Drake London in my name, you'll find that it's like truly like to a T. The percentage of routes that Puka was used as an in-breaking route is identical to the way that Drake London is being used. And the reason this is brought up is because it's the same offensive coordinator that Puka had last year in LA. And so I think Drake London is a great player to buy. I think if I'm buying anyone from Atlanta, he's the one who seems to be like fitting his role perfectly. And I'm really excited from what we've seen the last couple of weeks with Atlanta playing really, really fast and using a lot more under center multiple approaches offensively, and then play actions and just like really running the offense through Drake London. We've seen Darnell Mooney get involved more, and the targets have been kind of similar, but honestly, London is the one who has a much, much higher first read target rate. I think he's third of all players over the past 2 weeks in first read target rate. So he's the offensive centerpiece in the passing game, and I really like the spot for him. And then I also really like Olave on the other side here. I'm really curious what you think about New Orleans offense and what we saw last week, because they continue to be really run heavy. Through the first 2 weeks, we're like, we don't really know how to evaluate this offense because they're blowing everybody out. But then we saw them playing with a lead, and they kind of just kept running the crap out of the ball. Do you think that makes sense? And that's what we're going to continue to see? Like, that's the San Francisco way, you know?
It is. It's San Francisco way, and I think, we're talking about Clint Kubiak's offense, but I think so much can change depending on what's going to happen here with Kamara. I don't know if we've had the news since we started recording, but that offense is going to look so different if Kamara doesn't play. My one concern, Jacob, with this idea of the stack of Olave and London for DFS is, yes, I agree. I was enthused by the pace that Atlanta was trying to play with, but these are two good defenses, and these are division opponents that know each other really well. I am just a little concerned this game is going to be a lot more low scoring than we think.
It's one of the lowest projected totals on the whole week, which is why I kind of like it for DFS, because I think in tournaments, like, people aren't going to be using these players.
Okay, I like that.
Really priced.
So we're looking at it from more of a contrarian play. So maybe in Jacob's mind, we're playing it more tournaments. And I do like it from that standpoint. I just think a lot of Atlanta's offense is basically just going to be determined this year on can they get that outside zone working in the game because they'll be able to use play action off of that. And if not, I'm not so sure we're going to see the offense we hope to see. But I like what you're discussing with Drake London because it changes his whole outlook if he's used. And remember, for those who don't know, Zach Robinson comes over from the Rams. So that's where the connection with the Puka route running, the Puka share and how they're using him comes from. And it's just going to change his whole outlook, gives him so much of a higher floor. So he's somebody for that reason I'd definitely be looking to buy. I think at some point this offense just clicks. I'm a believer in Kirk Cousins and the way he can get the ball out on time with anticipation. So it's just a matter of when. Though Kyle Pitts, man, I've watched a little bit of tape recently on Pitts. It's just, again, not so bad this year, not so good, Jacob, but I don't see the player I saw at Florida at all. And I haven't seen that since he entered the NFL. I don't really understand why or how or what happened there. There's been a lot of injuries, little injuries, but he seems to be fully healthy now. So that's a player I'm not buying on. Any other thoughts on Atlanta?
I mean, the knee injury he had is pretty serious. I think it does make sense that he might be not the same player. I just traded Kyle Pitts in a dynasty league basically for Ayuk. There were other pieces involved, but it was a 2-point per tight end reception league, and I traded him for Ayuk, and I feel great about it because I, of course, have Pitts on basically all of my teams, and so it's good to get off him a little bit and get a receiver who can help me now because that team is not doing well. Yeah, I'm fine with trading Pitts. I do think he'll probably get more involved. I think it makes sense that like the target distribution will even out where it's not quite as much Ray McLeod and maybe it's not quite as much Darnell Mooney and more Pitts. But yeah, what we've seen so far hasn't looked great. My main thing with him is just like, I don't know, unless you're upgrading or something, unless you're like getting Brock Bowers or something like that, like I don't really know if it makes a lot of sense to trade him just because he does have some upside. We saw it last week, and tight end position is so barren right now. So the London note I wanted to bring up, last year he forced 7 missed tackles in 16 games. He's already forced 5 in 3 games. That has so much to do with the way he's used.
Yep.
You know, shocking. Like you get a different play caller. And I think that comes into effect with Olave as well, getting more of the field looks. Okay, let's move on to Kansas City and LA. This is another game that I think nobody's really going to be into. The total is relatively low, I think. Oh my gosh, 39.5.
Wow.
Because, yeah, the Chargers just run the crap out of the ball, and then Justin Herbert's not playing, so, like, we're going to try to do that as much as they can. They might have success against the Chiefs.
Is he definitely ruled out already, Herbert? I thought there was still some uncertainty on that front.
He's definitely ruled out.
Okay.
But, yeah, so I actually really like the spot for Ladd McConkey. The Chiefs don't use cover 3 at all. It's really strange. Cover 3 is the most prevalent defense in the NFL, and they do use single high a decent amount because they're using man coverage a lot. But, no, not nearly as much cover 3, and I think that bodes well for McConkey to have more 2 high safety looks, where Quentin Johnson is getting pressed on the outside by these big physical cornerbacks, and we're going to see a ton of targets funneled to McConkey. And if they do fall behind, then it might end up being like 8-10 targets, something like that. He has one of the highest target per route run rates of any player in the NFL. And on the Kansas City side of things, I think that the Chiefs, this might be the get right spot. It wouldn't surprise me if they actually have a really good offensive game here. Derwin James is already out. He's suspended, and then they might be without Joey Bosa as well. And this has been a defense that you can attack. So I'm curious if you think we maybe get Patty get right here and the Chiefs kind of get some offense going, or is it just going to be a lot of Carson Steele and J.K. Dobbins and the game's over really quickly?
I think it's going to be more of the latter, unfortunately. I've watched a lot of Chiefs this year, and I just don't get the feeling. I was hoping once Pacheco went out, they would, be a different kind of offense. But I get the feeling they're okay running Carson Steele. I mean, you put it out there on Twitter. I think it was from Coach Speak Index or whatever. They just said Carson Steele, it gets you an honest down. That's what Andy Reid said. He gives you an honest down. And it was one of the funniest quotes I've seen so far this season, because it's basically what Carson Steele gives you, an honest down. That's what Andy Reid wants. He wants honest downs. Andy Reid is not the guy we think he is or used to be when he first ran this home system. He understands how dominant the Steve Spagnuolo defense is, and that he doesn't need to go out of his way to try to win these games through aggressive play calling. So I unfortunately do not see that coming. I do love the Ladd call, though, because I do not think Quentin Johnson is going to create any separation on the outside. And I think that, it's one of those weird game scripts where They don't want to have to pass, and they're not going to want to have to pass Greg Roman and the Chargers. But by the end of this game, they're going to have to pass, even if it's just down 2 scores, because the Chiefs have played conservatively. So that's when we can get some super, high target volume for McConkey.
2 targets for Quentin Johnson last week, and one of them was a busted coverage. He has 2 touchdowns on busted coverages. I don't think he's creating a whole lot of separation. I think he's playing better than he did as a rookie. But I don't think you should look at his fantasy totals and think that's representative of what we're getting from him as a player. If Joey Bosa doesn't play, he didn't practice again today on Thursday.
Sure. No Derwin James.
They're already 30th in pressure rate. And maybe the Chiefs don't throw a lot, but I think when they do, we're going to have clean pockets. And I do think they want to get the passing game going after these last 2 weeks, and they want to get Kelsey going. I'm just kind of intrigued by it because I don't think anybody's going to want to play Patrick Mahomes in DFS this week, and he's cheap. I think it's a spot where we could see, I've got a few lineup situations where I don't necessarily know who to start, and I don't really want to start Xavier Worthy, but I think he could toast this defense. I think we could see him get some big catches on this defense because Mahomes has time to throw, and he can find him against a depleted secondary.
The play they ran throughout camp where they hit on it a bunch, and they ran it last week and they almost hit on it when Worthy's coming across in the end zone on a post. Maybe they hit that this week. That's the one I would look into. I think Mahomes kind of threw it to him rather than let him on the one last week, if I remember it, on the night game, on that island game, and they missed it. But that's the one I can see them maybe hitting. I also get a weird feel for Worthy. He's somebody who I think could actually hit this week. And let's see if we come back to that and we're right on that, because I have that same feel.
All right, one last game here. Bears versus Rams. This is the one that actually has a decent implied total. I wanted to go with some games that aren't quite so obvious here. And they also, and this one's only at 41. And they also have their offenses in flux. We don't really know what is going to happen with some of these offenses. So on the Rams side of things, I'm curious, how much longer do you think Kyren could do this? Because he's truly shouldering the entire workload right now.
We saw it last year. I think this can continue until I don't want to say until, hopefully if he can stay healthy, it can continue. The offensive line is an issue, but they've been able to work around it. Matthew Stafford's just an absolute phenomenal quarterback. I think he's one of the 5 best in the NFL when you consider how many times he's dealt with this situation of failing offensive lines, injuries, receivers out. It doesn't even matter. He processes so fast and he has better arm talent than all the other best processors in the NFL. So I think he'll be able to keep the offense moving, which is important because in the red zone, this is now Kyren's offense when you don't have Kupp out there and when you don't have Puka out there. So I'm still high on Kyren.
Such an insanely cool win by the Rams last week. I need to get your takes on the Sean McVay sunning Kyle Shanahan picture.
Well, that was interesting because I heard on a podcast this week from Mike Silver that there is a little behind the scenes stuff with McVay and Shanahan, and they respect each other and they were friends, but they're also a legit rivalry between them. So
huge competitors. I thought that was such a crazy disrespectful pose to strike. That's wild.
And he has a lot of success against Shanahan in spots that Shanahan shouldn't be losing games like last week.
Yeah. All right, on the Chicago side of things, do you have any read on the Bears receiver room if Keenan Allen returns? He was pretty clear in a way, the top target in week 1. I do think Odunze is more healthy and integrated into the offense at this point. I also don't know where Keenan's health is at. Do you have any read on the room?
Well, look, Odunze and Caleb have a chemistry that dates back before they even got drafted to this team, and it showed up throughout camp. Odunze, I think I said this, I think he's a case can be made. He's the most talented receiver on that roster, and I include DJ Moore in that. That's how high I was on my evaluation of Odunze. He's done nothing to show that that's not the case. But, the problem for me is Shane Waldron is running this offense. Problem for a multitude of reasons. Again, I think it's the worst run scheme in the NFL, which really impacts the whole game. DeAndre Swift, his numbers are horrific. We might see more Roshan Johnson this week. That's at least what the rumors are. Maybe that'll change things. Roshan was phenomenal on film at Texas. Just didn't get a lot of opportunities because he's playing behind Bijan Robinson. But ultimately, when you're just going to run similar plays over and over, this is the same problem for Kenneth Walker last year. It's not going to be difficult to scheme against if you're an opposing defense. So I still have concerns, Jacob, that we'll get back to what we saw in the first 2 weeks, which is a dead offense here. So then it's am I going to play Odunze? Am I going to play
even against the Rams?
Even against the Rams, this defense beat up. I just don't trust Shane Waldron until I need to see it first. I love Caleb. It's just I have very little respect for the way that he's running that offense. And quite frankly, how the offensive line is playing. It didn't really make as much of an impact last week. Again, also like people talk about the Caleb Williams games. How much of that like is changes if we don't get that Hail Mary for like at the end of the half to DJ Moore that like changes every stat line, changes Moore's stat line, changes Caleb's stat line.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just not as high as you are. I hope I'm going to be proven wrong though.
No, I wouldn't overreact to the Caleb stat line. They're not going to throw that many times every week.
Right.
This is just such a great matchup here. And with Keenan back, I think the offense could work. I don't think the Rams are going to get a ton of pressure. I didn't know you're a Roshan guy.
Oh, I was a huge Roshan guy from his tape in Texas.
I did not know.
Phenomenal talent.
The only other thing I wanted to mention from this game is that Tutu Atwell cheat motions are back on the menu. I call it a cheat motion because it truly does feel like cheating. Go and watch it. Like I put it on Twitter. They're using him in pre-snap motion and getting him where he's already moving at the snap of the ball. And he often is moving into a bunch formation of receivers where he effectively kind of has like a pick set for him right at the snap. So you definitely can't press him. And then even there could be miscommunications on that with the defense. We saw it work last year. It worked in week 3. He had 12 routes as a pre-snap motion guy. Only him and Cooper Kupp have more than 10 routes as a pre-snap motion guy in any given game this year. And that does boost efficiency. So I'm pretty into Tutu Atwell this week. I'm starting him in several places. Even in like dynasty leagues, some deeper dynasty leagues, I was still able to like scoop him up and not have to give up too much. I'm curious what you think. Is he like actually a viable player? Am I going to get burned here? Because it's not an easy matchup.
Viable play, because I think the reason you said how they use him, it does negate a little bit of what makes the Bears so special on defense. You don't want to have wide receivers matched up on the outside against the Bears in the boundary, but Sean McVay is the king of not having a lot of those situations because he has those condensed splits with his wide receivers, which again, I feel like it's a cheat code as well that he figured out before the rest of the NFL figured out. And I've seen a lot of coordinators and play callers use it since then. And, you know, it gives you those situations where you can create those legal picks, as I'll call them. The Giants have done a great job of this. Malik Neighbors using Theo Johnson to kind of just create that traffic. And it looks like they're running a route. They technically are running a route, but really what they're doing is creating that separation. But it depends a lot on how much man coverage I think the Bears are going to play. And sometimes you'll see like zone with pattern match principles behind it. So it's really man coverage, but it looks disguised as zone. It might even get charted as zone. That's something the Bears run a lot as well, just like most teams run. Most of these zone heavy teams run. So you want to find looks like that where you can get Tutu Atwell, like you said, those free releases, maybe some picks, maybe some traffic to create, because he is fast enough and quick enough to use that space to his advantage. And Matthew Stafford's just so good that he can get him the ball there with velocity, with ball placement, and with timing and anticipation. So I'm also high on Atwell this week.
He's your favorite Rams receiver over DeMarcus Robinson?
He is easily my favorite Rams receiver this week.
Over Xavier Leggett, over Tyler Lockett, Andre Yoshabas?
Players. Yes, over all those players.
Okay, I love it.
Yep, I'm in on that. All right, maybe that's where we ended it, Jacob, with a call for Tutu Atwell, for you to play Tutu Atwell if you're desperate for a flex this week, if you're in a shallow league but you got injuries, whatever it may be, if you want to put that last guy in your DFS slate. That's our call this week, and let's see what can happen there, because that's a deep one. We're going into it. We're going against the Bears defense that's good, but I feel good about this as well, Jacob. So thanks again to everybody tuning in and listening to Beyond the Box Score, our Thursday show. We hope you enjoyed the guest, Adam Levitan, today. I thought we got into a lot of really good topics, and I really enjoyed this conversation. If you want to help us, please help support the show. We are a new show. There's a lot that's going to happen with a new show, but one thing that needs to happen is your support. If we want the show to grow, if we want it to continue, if we want it to get to the places that Jacob and I have envisioned down the line. And the best way to do that is a free way for you that will take 13 seconds of your time, maybe. Subscribe to the show right now if you're not subscribed on Fantasy Football Today. Subscribe to our Fantasy Football Today channel. Hit that like button and then comment. Comment anything. You could just say, great show. Or you could say, I'm here for the algorithm. I don't care what you say. I just know that if you comment and if you hit the like button on this show, it's going to make such a massive difference. You think it's nothing, but it means everything toward what we're trying to do here and what we're trying to build. I'm going to make this plea a lot. I understand it's going to get repetitive. I understand it's going to get annoying.
Even Mean Dan comments, are those on the table?
I'll take Mean Dan.
Anything for the algo?
I'll take anything for the algo at this point. I really will. I'm a slave to the algorithm. I need you guys to help boost this up for us. So please, I'm going to start asking for the beginning of the show too. I'm going to be so shameless about this. You guys are going to say this is the most annoying guy ever. But if it leads to you commenting, this is the most annoying guy ever, that's a win for me. And that's a win for Jacob. So we're going to end on that note. Little shameless plug. thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And hopefully you guys have a great week.